All right. Hey, what's up? You guys are starting to slowly jump
In
in.
FIFA 15, we've rebuilt goalkeepers from the ground up. The most mental.
Whoa, I forgot I had the chat open. I don't care about FIFA 15. Oh. I know you guys are used to seeing my beautiful face, but I thought I'd keep it poignant. Hey, what's up, everybody? Yes, everybody tweet and share. Let everybody know what's going on. Buy commands to get some. Change a catalyst. What's up? Buy commands to get them going. Get people know what's going on, rather. Tweeting. My Vox is a bit off. I'm not sure. Hello and welcome everybody in the stream. I know you guys have been super excited about this. We've been talking about it for at least 2 weeks, and I know you guys are chomping at the bit to get it started. We have a Mr. Aidy Burrows from CG Masters with us. I think he's still there. Are you there?
Hey, how's it going?
All right.
I am still here in the future.
Talking to us from the future. Tequila Shot says hello, Mr. Aidy.
Yeah.
Tequila.
Hey, hello.
All right, just to give you guys an overview of sort of how we're gonna, excuse me, do the interview. We're gonna do an introduction, learn who Mr. Aidy Burrows is, and he's gonna take us to through his workflow, and then all the way to pretty much from concept all the way to end game, and when it's done. At any point during him talking or me talking, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. We'll stop. We'll answer it. That's pretty much the theme of this. You get to pick the brain of the pros. So 80's voice is too low. All right, let's turn him up a bit. Let's turn you up. All right, we'll try it one more time.
How's this? How's this? Or maybe I should just start shouting into this mic thing.
I'll turn you up on my end.
Yeah. How's this? How's this? Anyone?
All right, let's see. It's a
hey,
bit
hey,
of a
hey.
test 1 2.
Yeah. 1 2 1 2 1 2. How's this? How's this? Any better? Turn up. Too loud. No.
All right.
Yeah. Cool, man.
Okay.
Cool.
So let's share the window. We'll get it started here. And all right, Mr. Aidy Burrows, we would love to know who you are, what you've done, what you're doing now. Just give us, who is Aidy in the mind of Aidy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've up until just a few months ago, I was at TT Fusion, which is part of the Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment Group. TT Fusion is in a sort of a small way, like kind of zooming in on the Warner Brothers picture there. TT Fusion is sort of twinned with TT Games, which is part of the reason TT Fusion is actually called TT Fusion, because it's fused with TT Games. TT Games are most famous for all those Lego games, you know, the Lego Marvel, most recently, Lego City, which I know that you know somebody who, you know, Pipes, that you've been talking with. We worked together on that game. You've got... let's see, basically all of them, really. The TT Fusion did quite a amount of handheld versions of those titles as well, but they handled some of the next-gen versions as well, because you've got, sometimes there was some cross-pollination between those studios and stuff. Let's see, we did a bit of Lord of the Rings, you know, that kind of stuff.
So at TT Fusion, did you guys have your own proprietary engine, or were you using like Unity or something like that when you're making?
No, yeah, the former, the proprietary stuff. So it's all pretty bespoke. They have their own engine guys in there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's not, as far as I'm aware, I don't think they necessarily try and ship it out to other people. So you won't find like loads of other people necessarily on that. But I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen somewhere though.
Oh, okay, cool.
Said that, yeah. So there by the way, I mean, if anyone's looking at my screen and thinking, what on earth is that? this is Blender that I have open at the moment, and that's what I offer training in these days. Do a load of free tutorials and stuff for this, because actually in my workflow at the studio, I was using Blender supplementary to Maya and ZBrush and well, anything else we could get our hands on there. We actually used Max very briefly, actually, for one project, but that was more or less just for conversion. Because sometimes you'll work with another studio, they work with something else, and then suddenly you realize there's a whole other kettle of fish that you don't understand to do with import and export and you know, that kind of stuff. You know, so yeah, basically the reason I have this screen open right now is just because this is what I use mostly at the moment, but that's not necessarily to indicate that this is what the studio used most.
Right.
In fact, Lego Marvel, one of the levels in that, if you're familiar with that game, there's a bit where you get to play inside the Statue of Liberty and it's moving around. That was the level I worked on. And in the next gen version, and that was a lot of the assets I did in that was actually done in Blender, funnily enough. But I ended it in Maya and then exported out from there because it's using their proprietary engine. And so, yeah, we would export out from Maya and then test the game and then export and then commit. And then it goes into the main version of the game, and then everybody, then you see whether you've really broken it or not. And then eventually it ends, and that's that. So yeah, that's hopefully sort of indicates sort of where I'm at anyway, or what I'm kind of about, or in a short way anyway, without trying to get too indulgent on some.
Right. Right. I guess jumping back to what you said earlier, you said you worked with multiple or different studios, and they use 3ds Max, and you work with people that use Maya. Was there a specific reason as to why your studio used Blender? Was it just like a draw of straws kind of thing?
No, I mean the studio didn't necessarily use Blender as such. They used Maya, but I just started using Blender because I was at home. I was starting up my own freelance stuff, or at least I thought down the line what I'll like to do is if people or friends want to start their own little games and we want to do our own sort of or anything, like, because I kind of know some people in music as well, so we would do music videos, and so I do the VFX for that, and we would do sort of filming and whatnot. And so it was like, well, what applications do we need out there? So okay, After Effects, that sounds pretty good, get that on there. Get Photoshop, that sounds pretty good. I was costing all this up as I went, so you would kind of get, all right, okay, a few £100 for that, a few £100 for that, or dollars or whatever it is. And then it's you'd go through the list. ZBrush, okay, that's cool. And then I got to Maya, and it was like, whoa, this is quite expensive. So that kind of blew the whole budget of everything out of the water. So I was starting to look around for alternatives, and that's where Blender came in, because that's free. And it's still hard to understand how that is free. And it's not just free, it's open source. So that kind of comes with a whole other set of benefits in a way. So you have a lot of people interested in working on it, and it's very open. So you can report something was wrong with it, and then later that afternoon, that problem is fixed. These kinds of things, that was quite common.
Right.
With working with it. So yeah, that was just my decision, and I learned on 3ds Max incidentally in college. So when and it took about 2 weeks to kind of convert my knowledge into Maya, and then quite similarly, it didn't take very long to convert my knowledge into Blender either. So yeah, I would just because you get into it, you kind of go, okay, where's chamfer, where's bevel, where's cut, where I need to insert some loops, where's that. Like once you start to understand a little bit of how you sort of just chop and change a little bit of basic geometry, you end up, you realize there's a lot of very, very similar things going on. The reason ZBrush seems so bizarre to a lot of polygon modelers is that it's not really sort of polygon modeling. It's, there's a whole different set of things that you're doing with that.
It's like pixels or something like along those lines,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's funny. I just want to take a step back. It's funny that you say that you started in college with 3ds Max, and then you segued to Blender. And I know that's like the pressing question when you're starting off, as myself as a beginner and the viewers as beginners, and they're always thinking, I would assume, if I can't get my hands on like 3ds Max or Maya, I should just stop. And and I try to tell them that once you learn the basics, it trends, you can, all it takes is just to learn the software. So what's your opinion on coming out, or even trying to start in the 3D community? Is it get your hands on what you can, learn the good?
Yeah, definitely, because the portfolio is king really on that. If you've got something that looks really well, if you've got something that displays you've got art ability, you know what I mean? Like if you, I don't necessarily mean just necessarily 2D art or 3D art or anything, just having a good eye for a good image, then or you kind of seem to understand shape, rhythm, color, how to tie a scene together, these sorts of things, or how to present. These things are pretty agnostic. You could do all of that. What I just said could be done. You don't know whether I'm talking about 2D or 3D. It's just art, and that's what comes across and is most powerful when you see that portfolio. And when somebody sees something like that, they don't really care what you use to an extent. I mean, fair enough, there probably are some studios where that is going to matter a little bit, but if you've got a really good portfolio, they won't really care what it is, because most people, if you're an outsource person, for example, as long as you can deliver up some FBX or OBJ, then that's pretty much agnostic as well. So, the software that you learn on, you need to demonstrate your artistic ability, not necessarily your ability in that software.
Right.
And then from that point, you can then just, if it's like, hey, we use Maya and ZBrush in our company, we don't use Mudbox and Blender, say, it's like, or whatever the case, whatever the pairing might be, they would say, okay, well, learn it then, or at least, they don't necessarily maybe want you to learn on the job or whatever, but I certainly learned on the job when I started. I was I went in as a junior role, so it was expected that they were going to probably get a hard-working individual who was going to be passionate, very interested in carrying on and all that sort of stuff, and then learning all of that. And like I say, I mean, when I finally got in the door, that's when the real learning began. Right.
So like we were discussing the other night, pretty much when you get out of school, you're learning the tools that get you to sit at the table, pretty much, to be in the company, right?
Yes, that's it. Yeah. So I mean, that might be, I mean, we also was discussing how potentially that sounds intimidating to somebody who's sort of not yet got into the industry, and they're thinking, wow, there's some other people that have just got in the industry and I'm losing track on them, and they're now in there getting paid to learn. But it's not quite as clear cut as that. It's you and on your own have got the ability to just hammer poly count and get amazing advice out of that, and work on projects specifically that you want to work on. And while that might not be the same as necessarily getting a few years experience on your CV for such as I worked in this studio, it's still pretty powerful to get that feedback. So
brilliant. Awesome. Well, let's learn more about you and CG Masters. I know that that's where you're currently sort of your baby now. So tell us more about that. If you want to, we can see your screen. So I think people want to see more than the cube. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not impressed by this,
huh? No, it's not doing anything.
Let me just jump over to see now you asked me about CG Masters. This is the website, the cgmasters.net. And this is where we offer training at the moment. There's a bunch of free tutorial stuff, and this is mostly like Blender, but we'll probably branch out and do some other stuff. And so this, that by the way, is the recent environment DVD that I put out. And so I've been doing that, but as I say, as I inclined towards before, I'm doing other things like freelance and working with, working on music videos, doing little films, things like that as well, VFX side of stuff. But also I'm working on my own game project. So let me see if I can sort of find that. Let's see. So in fact, let me see if I've got a blend file open. This is something that I'm working on at the moment. This is sort of an adaptation of some of the stuff that I did on that CG Masters. We can see if it clicks in or not. I don't know whether you can see anything. Can you see a file with? Let me see if we get any lag here.
The Urban Gaps reference.
Let's see. Okay. I wonder if there's a little bit of a delay at all. Actually,
yeah, it is.
Screen.
It is probably about 5 or 6 seconds, maybe.
Right. Okay. Because you may not be able to tell, but can you see that screen now? Can you see like a corridor?
An alleyway.
Street.
Yeah,
yes,
we can see. Yeah,
right,
we can see that. Yeah.
So this is using a lot of those assets that are built in the DVD that I was talking about. But this is basically just going to be a free game eventually when I kind of bring it out. So it's kind of going to be an environment, a kind of a sort of an atmospheric title, like a survival horror kind of thing, but not in a traditional sort of. I'm not going to make this a massive game or anything. This is just something that I wanted to do, show what can be done with a very, very small team. And in this case, it would be like a team of pretty much me.
All right, I want to cut you
So
off before you go any further. Did your
go on.
screen freeze, or are you still moving around? Because it says a loading icon. It makes me kind of worried.
No, I'm not actually. I've left the mouse alone just to hope that it might catch up. So I've got this little circle thing. In the
Okay,
middle,
so
yeah,
you see that too. Okay, I thought we were just okay. But
Yeah.
let's see. Somebody asked in the stream. Oh, where'd it go? Did you work on Sentinel?
Sintel.
Sintel, yeah.
Yeah, one of the Blender movies. No, not myself personally. That's one of the colleagues on the site. He does the main animation sort of stuff. So yeah, but yes,
Yeah, we're good now. We're good. We loaded.
yeah, the two of the guys, other guys that work on that site are both like kind of big Blender dudes, really. So you got like one of them did the one of the main guys on the Blender game project that was out, the open game project called Yo Frankie, and the other guy did a couple of things. One of them was Elephant's Dream, and the other one was Sintel. Yeah, he's big on that scene. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, let's. This scene is awesome. Walk us through, sort of, how you came to make this scene. So, like, when before you even start bending any pixels or breaking any kind of verts open or anything like that, before you even got into Blender, what's some of the first kind of steps that an environment artist or even a character artist would take? What's the
Well, the premise for the game first. So the premise for the game on this is to try and get something which is basically like a 3D version of Pac-Man. So what was interesting about that is I think Alien Isolation had just been announced or something, and that got me thinking about, you know, those simple games where you just have a single entity chasing you through the maze or some environment of some kind. And that was what you know, Alien Isolation obviously is. You know, you got this one super powerful enemy which is just stalking you through the level. And so that was what Pac-Man was. Basically, that survival horror.
Survival horror Pac-Man.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, you got, obviously it's delivered in a, you know, the art style is not delivered in that typical way where it's trying to tingle the atmospheric branches of your soul. But I would say that it's easy to essentially go through a maze. You're trying to collect something, but there's something in there searching for you. And I'm actually gonna potentially. I don't know whether this scene is really super slow or not, because I have another version, another laptop open recent. This is the best. The reason I'm on this, I really must apologize, but the reason I'm on this laptop, which is a little bit on the slow side, is because it's the one that has seemingly the best working microphone for this interview.
Oh, so, no worries. We appreciate you coming out.
So yeah, because we've kind of thrown this together kind of short notice, haven't we? But
right.
I want to see. I have another version. I have another blend file open. Blender has a game engine inside it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what you can. I think you can see now, is you kind of can see inside. It's kind of just single celled. So this is just a block out. It's just a gray boxes for everything. Apart from there is actually a trash bag
in the middle.
That you can see. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically, this is kind of inside the maze, and then you need to collect all of those things while this other thing is chasing you around. So I'm kind of just doing that now, actually. So if I just start to move through, I wonder if it'll catch up with us eventually, and you'll start to see us move through. So this is kind of answering your question as to how to start on in this, which was kind of get the idea for the game and then block it out and essentially try and finish that game as quickly as possible.
Right.
If you're making a game, that is, if you're thinking about it from a game designer and an artist point of view.
And when you say block out, I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page, because we do have some people in the stream.
Block out, sorry.
Right. So when you say block out, what do you mean by block out? So if I want to make this level and you say block out,
when we were looking at that alleyway, you remember the alleyway that we were looking at, which was sort of much more high res, you know, you could see all the textures and stuff on there. Before you get to that level, before you start blocking it all in before you start putting all the the textures and really laying out exactly how you're going to build it. You want to basically just get some gray boxes, kind of build the whole level. So you basically making something extremely quickly and as simply as you possibly can, and that allows you to get scale, and then you know suddenly what problems you're going to have. So
Right.
okay, so I realized that, oh right, well, this needs to be my scale. This is how wide the buildings need to be. This is how much of the environment I'm going to lose, or
Right.
that I'm going to be able to see. Or so I had an idea. I wanted to make this very foggy, for example, not just because I kind of like that old school method of culling geometry, so you don't have to render quite so much on the screen, but just so that you can. It's saying me.
Right. So it looks like we've got a question from the viewers from Knifey versus, would you recommend Blender for a beginner?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It is hard to pick up because it's kind of like one of those things where it's got so much in it that it's one of them where, you know, like there was this talk of user interface recently, and a very good point was made where the best user interface is essentially just a black screen with a flashing cursor which says, it gives you complete access to the code. You know what I mean? And you could just sort of start to create your art just using code, because it basically just allows you to do absolutely anything. So almost like no user interface whatsoever is like the best and most powerful tool. But that is obviously just a coder, that's not somebody who's using a piece of software. So perhaps a beginner would look at a piece of software and go, well, the best software for me really is something where you got two buttons on screen, and one of them's the make animation button and the other one's the make art button. And basically, you just, like in Star Trek or something, you just sort of say, computer,
Right.
I want you to build such and such. And you just, you just speak it at the screen.
Right.
That sort of stuff.
From the future, you said, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
All right, looks like we've got a couple of questions. Metallic Blazer wants to know, when you are blocking out, how much detail do you block out?
As little as possible. So the absolute bare minimum. If a rough scale, a rough way to work it out is essentially just build the collision mesh.
Right. So you want to get a strong, pretty much like if you have a complicated object, you just want to get the silhouette.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, because in what I'm doing in this game, the blockout that you can see in the moment, which is very, very obviously very basic, but what I'm actually doing in it is simply using the same geometry that you're looking at. The render mesh that we're looking at here is the same as the collision mesh. They're one and the same. So rather than making extra problems for yourself, you can just use the same thing. And this would be super modular as well. So I would start to building separate. I'm going to sort of quit the game at this moment and just go over. Again, you're going to get a slight lag on this, I guess.
Right.
But I'm going to go into the other file with the alleyway. I'm going to go into wireframe, and I'm going to hope that helps speed us up.
Let's see. The next question is an open-ended question, so that means anybody in the stream or you or myself. Excuse me.
Yeah.
How much is real-life inspiration come into play when you design an environment?
Well, that would depend on the end art, really. What you're going for. So, but I would probably say, I mean, in what way? In sort of in terms of you're going to reference the amount of real world reference that you're using, for example. Is that what they might mean?
It might be a little delay with him hearing and then responding. So I'm assuming, I'm just going to try to assume what he means. So when designing something, whether it be like Lego or, some stylized, piece or game level, how much does an environment artist draw? How much would they draw from real life kind of reference?
A lot, quite a massive amount, in fact. The concept art is, so let's see, let's take through, let's kind of use an example from TT Fusion. what some of the workflow that would happen in that a typical you're an environment artist, you're on that team, there's say, I don't know, 5 environment artists on the team at that point, and you're starting to get going. So initially what's already happened is the art director and maybe some art lead or somebody sort of who's leading the art of the team has already done a level or two. And that, so you have a kind of a standard of what the kind of level you're aiming for, some of the concepts, so kind of how the light, because there's many different ways to do something. Even if you look at real life, like on television, you're gonna see loads of different styles of lighting, loads of different color schemes, loads of different ways in which atmosphere is essentially interpreted. So on the one hand, you might have somebody who uses a lot of, it seems very desaturated. On another time, so somebody would say, well, no, we want it much more colorful. What you've done there is really great, and it's very atmospheric. You've hit all the things we wanted to do with this game, but it isn't colorful enough, because we want to also introduce this aspect to it. So there's a lot of discussion, and those kinds of things get ironed out, and hopefully you would kind of interpret and feel a good sense of it by seeing what the art director and those art leads have done first. So now getting down to the specific, you're assigned the level, and you're told, let's say it's from a film franchise, and it's or it's like, for example, on Lego Marvel, it's like, well, now you're going to do something inside the Statue of Liberty. You would get a piece of concept. Somebody would come. I had a good couple of pieces of concept there, but the downside for that concept was it's a vertical building. Obviously, you're going to go through that vertically. You start from the feet and you work your way up to the top, and then there's a scene at the end which is inside the destroyed head. So you kind of get the 2 pieces of concept work. I got 2 pieces of concept work for that particular level, and it looked pretty good. It looks sort of photorealistic in that. So you've got a lot of texture information on that concept. You've got the lighting was on that. I had a really good feel for that. It was this dark, it was this smoky, it was this. You had this level of fog to it. There was these aspects to it. There was a good sense of movement, even though it was a still image. You sort of got the feeling of, oh, okay, I get the energy of this scene. And so then you would take that and then you would try and block it out, as I say. So the way TT Fusion works is that there would be already a tech artist that would have blocked that out, and they're the people who are doing a lot of the Lego. They're building the complicated Lego structures that all unfold and so on. So you have that going on, but then you would actually start to block it out further. So you kind of do you kind of do like an advanced block out, I suppose, somewhere between a block out and a first pass. So a first pass would be something where you want to get all your textures on. You want to get all your models. You want to know that you've got these set of modular pieces. It's not going to be final art by any stretch, but it's going to be essentially you get a feel for the final piece after final art. But after first pass, I mean. So after the block out, you're given a block out, you want to go then into like an advanced block out, really, and that's when you kind of get the silhouettes in. That's what I would do anyway, at that point.
So when you receive the block out and say, I'm an environment artist, am I receiving that block out from a level designer, or what's the workflow?
Yes, the tech artist has worked with the designer, so that has a tech artist assigned to that level, a designer assigned to that level, an animator assigned to that level, an environment artist assigned to that level, and usually some QA. A QA guy would probably be assigned to that level as well. But having said that, you would all be essentially doing that quality assurance yourself as well, to check that things aren't breaking, to not do anything too stupid, basically. An interesting point was that when I got that in concept art and I tried to piece it together in block out, I realized the 2 pieces that wouldn't fit. In the real world, there was no way, or in 3D for that matter, there was no way to actually build those 2 levels to connect them together. It was impossible. So I had to completely redesign or reconcept in a way, like how those two levels were going to join together. So at that point, you work with the art director about it, because potentially the concept artist is too busy. They
Right.
can't do another draft of that, or yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was just making sure that I was understanding your flow. So you're saying that you got your concept from your artist, your environment artist,
Yeah.
and you're building it, and you're like, "There's just no way this is going to work." So you made
Yeah.
the call saying, "Hey," you went to
Yes.
your lead and like, "Look,
Yeah.
I know this is a concept. It's not going to
Yeah.
work." And
Yeah.
okay, that's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So from then I block something out, or I take images from the real world. I get on Google at that point, Google Images, and then start to get a very unusual search history, which by just I must be on so many government lists.
Statue of Liberty. How
Yeah,
big is
explosion,
it?
destroying, American Monument
Right.
1, 2, and 3.
How does it fall apart? Arm first,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
nuclear. This, all sorts. So yeah. You end up on that. You then try and just basically then work with the art director and just try and figure out where you think the bottlenecks are going to be, because you could kind of look at it and kind of go, well, I need to know that information pretty soon. So yeah, you kind of try to analyze those problems first, which is what I tried to do. I tried to piece the scene together, and I realized it wouldn't work technically. Just that was impossible. So yeah.
Brilliant. All right.
So yeah, and then beyond that, it was okay. There are all these pieces in that, and then it was a case of there was lots of girders inside the Statue of Liberty. There was lots of steps. There was lots of these sort of metal plates, tread plating, so a few other assets like that. And then it was just build a bit of a modular kit, and then you can throw the whole building together pretty soon. Then, so
Brilliant. All right. Well, let's get into more of. I know a lot of people are interested in Blender because there's always talk of Maya and 3ds Max, and it's amazing, awesome that you're using Blender. So the show is sort of like the independent party.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, funnily enough, as I say, just to reiterate again, if anyone missed it, there was a lot of Blender used in that level that I'm talking about, in that Lego Marvel level, the Statue of Liberty level. There's tons of Blender on that level. It's exported from Maya at the end, but there was a lot of those assets, a lot of those modular pieces, a lot of the, a lot of 3D painting, a lot of the baking, a lot of the high-res modeling, things like that. Because of things like Maya doesn't have a lot of the workflow that 3ds Max has. You have a lot of modifier workflow in 3ds Max. So does Blender. So you can work very non-destructively in the same way you can with Photoshop adjustment layers.
right.
So you're not bloating your scene with spare copies of this, spare copies of that, just before I destroyed it with this, and
Right.
that kind of thing. Yeah. So that helps.
Right. All right. Let's jump back. Looks like we had a question way back. I think you answered it from. Excuse me. Jackson Joe Bob wants to know, what software do you use for texturing?
Texturing. Well, to a degree, I use Blender because it's 3D painting, and then I get a lot of like, for example, there's a if I don't, again, there's probably a bit of a lag, but if I'll sort of bring this up and we'll see if anything comes of it. But you can kind of see I've kind of just in fact, I'm going to click on that link. I've clicked on a tiling texture Blender tutorial. Coins is what I've clicked on, and you'll probably get to see like a little image in a second. Should show up.
Yeah, you can throw that link in chat if you want to. Maybe they can click on it, follow along.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Let's do that. I've actually just, you'll see the screen catch up in a minute.
Right.
But yeah, this is probably me and my very poor laptop, but I will tweet that link, well, share that link on as well. Let me see. So yeah, as way of an example, this is a texture which is a tiling coins, and you can kind of see I've basically just more or less just done that in Blender. But also, yeah, you can use any other 2D app. You do need another 2D application, which I was using GIMP as well, but I'm more used to using Photoshop, to be honest. But GIMP is if in case I hadn't heard of that. You'd think you would with a name like that. It'd be sort of memorable, but
Right.
I hadn't actually heard of that. But yeah, I don't know whether. No, I need to sign in or something to be
All
able to
right.
post that link.
Well, here we'll throw it in the Skype chat, and then I'll
Cool.
drop it in there.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's perfect. All
Well,
right.
let's see. So we're talking about texturing. We're gonna do that a bit. Yeah, let's continue the texture, and then we're gonna move into sort of your. I'm more interested, and I'm pretty sure that we're interested in your workflow as far as how do you get from environment artist hands you something, and then just walk us through like a day in the life, like from concept all the way till they say it's brilliant right after you do the texturing.
Yeah, the that's an interesting thing. So you get somewhere like Naughty Dog, where they don't necessarily allow a single artist to do everything. Whereas in TT Fusion, we were pushing ourselves as artists in every level. I think it's a very, very underrated studio, actually. Because it's some of the hardest stuff to do is to get it looking great on a handheld. There is a massive amount of optimizing that's required, and that's the process that probably isn't talked about that much, the optimizing at the end, which sometimes is actually outsourced. But eventually you're probably going to have to do that, and that isn't great. People don't really normally enjoy that stuff. That's like, it has the same impression as unwrapping. People don't tend to like UV unwrapping. People don't tend to like retopology. I actually don't mind those things. It's quite meditative. It's actually quite peaceful to just stick some music on and get on with it. But yeah, that you've also got optimizing, which is a little bit more just that can be a real pain, because sometimes you can see how amazing it looks, and you may have noticed this on some games. You get to see early on in the development, and then by the time you get to see it and buy it, a lot of those textures have been down-resed. You've got to basically squeeze it onto the worst case scenario and still hit the frames per second that you're looking for. So
Right.
sometimes that amazing texture you've done, it just needs to be down res, and it's like, oh, now all the beautiful detail in it is gone. It's smushed.
Right.
Or you have to come up with a different way of doing it, or the camera has to be different, or everyone can sort of pull together to do that sort of stuff.
Right. Oh, when you said texturing, now I've heard myself and a couple of viewers and me when I'm streaming, I talk about texture density, and I'm not a texture artist, but I'm an
Like
environment
texel density.
Yeah, textile density. So what
Yeah.
could you go into explaining what that is and how that's important to
Yeah,
the
sure.
continuity?
Yeah, basically the best way of being able to show why that's important, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be too strict with that, especially if you're going modular. You don't have to be too strict with that, because but anyway, the what that is, first of all, is texel is essentially like pixel and texture sort of combined together. You can see that that's where that word seems to originate. But the point is that the texture is only using so many points. So you've got like 1024 by 1024, say, points along that image. But let's say you're using, for some reason, a 128 by 128 image, and then it gets blown up on the screen. There's one point where you look at the wall and it's sat next to a 1024 by 1024 texture, but that 128 by 128 texture is trying to fill the same space as that 1024. So you have this sort of blurry looking image on like blurry looking brick image texture on one side, and then a really sharp contrast, perfectly beautiful texture on the other side, and it essentially just breaks continuity. It's like either have them both blurry or both really good, but them both separate, the having that texel density so different sat next to each other, it sort of breaks an illusion. And you can see that because that's one of the things that artists use for emphasis. So for example, depth of field is essentially blurring out most of the image, apart from, say, what's in the foreground or what's in the background, and you're going to blur out the foreground in that case. And if you've got you use that to pull emphasis. And so if you're sort of pulling emphasis, but just because it's poorly done, then you're essentially making statements you didn't mean to make, and as well as sort of distracting the audience from the points that should be made, the atmosphere you're trying to create. Right. And that's that. So from an artistic point of view, that's the reason why it's important to look at. But from a technical point of view, what it basically looks like is if you have, imagine looking at a widescreen image, and on the left-hand side you have, a brick wall. And let's say you're looking at the corner of a wall, and on one side of that corner, it's 128 by 128, and on the other side, it's 1024 by 1024. But those are both blown up to be cover the same size. You're going to get, one's going to look blurry, one of them's going to look sharp, and that's probably that's a problem.
All right, we've got a question from Fat Pep. When you're part of a huge artist team, how hard can it be to keep the art logic from one level to another? So keep the continuity of the look. I'm assuming that he's asking. And
yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's practice. It's the artists have to do it again and again, and that's the team lead. That's a responsibility of a lead artist. It would have to interpret the what has been given. So let's say as an artist, you would then sort of say, hey, I've done this level, what do you think? And then at that point you would go through a review process. And even if you were a lead artist, you would then take that to the art director, and the art director would then put that through a review process, and then kind of say, well, you see, we're not doing edges that thick. All of the edges should be a lot, sort of more sort of sharp. We want the assets to seem chunkier. These are too thin and spindly. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So, for example, you might have a cute-looking Lord of the Rings kind of title, and it's like, well, no, everything needs to be sort of more chunky-looking. That kind of stuff, rather than it being much more sort of defined and spiky. But then a level to level would be like that. Sometimes games fail at that as well. Sometimes there isn't an art continuity as well necessarily, but sometimes it's not really a big deal. It still plays well. So that essentially that's the most important thing, is that it plays well. But obviously you don't want to break any vibe. I remember David Lynch used to call adverts like dream breakers. So you don't necessarily want to pull somebody out of some carefully crafted, like a comedian, when you have a warm-up act, and it's almost like a snowball effect. There's momentum there, and then if you suddenly break it with something that seems out of place, then you ruin that somehow. Right. But,
right. Yeah. With the textile density, can you show us? Yes, I know you had a window open with Blender. Could you show some of that? The texture density or textile density as you're speaking about.
Yes.
A lot of people think the stream is frozen. They're like, is it frozen?
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's just because of the awful lag that I'm getting. I'm trying not to
too much, right?
To be too confusing, because you would get something which would be kind of complicated. So let's see. Let's do this. I'll try and just demonstrate what we can maybe get here. So let's just give us a little thing there, and then let's see. In fact, let's try something else. Let's go. Let's just make this shadeless as well. Actually, let's see.
And can you explain a little bit about the menus? Because I know some people don't know what Blender is, so we're just like, what are those buttons you're pressing?
Yeah, sure. Basically, this is the main 3D view, as you may be able to tell, that I'm working on with the cube, which is the cube on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, I've opened up another window, which is a texture window, and that is basically where you can do some painting and some other things, basically, with regards to UVing. And then, as I say, I'm in the left-hand side window here, which we need to be able to give this some UVs, which is why this isn't doing anything at the moment. So let's then bring that texture in. So this window down on the bottom right is a properties window. So you have all these tabs at the top of it where you have things that are related to the object. You don't really have a right click in Blender in the way that you would do with some other applications, in particular Macs. Where a lot of that detail you would find if you were to right-click an object is found actually in the this property window, which you can close out or you can show if you really need to. But this is the image that we want to bring in so we can see it on the model. And let's get that to use UVs as well. So we have this, and let's see, if we basically if I grab this face and then duplicate it and then just sort of sit it next to it, so I've got these two faces, it would be kind of like having a texture which was, something you can do in the UV editing window is just to scale some stuff up by just going S and then, I don't know, maybe 4 times. So you can just click S and then 4 and it just scales it 4 for you. And then same thing with this as well, actually. You can, instead of using this gizmo, you can shut the gizmo off altogether, which is just down here. And then at that point now what you can do is you can press G to start moving stuff around. What you can actually do is, if you know exactly what you want to do, you can just press GX2, and then that will move it you will move it 2 units along the x-axis and stuff like that. So you have a lot of ways of being able to just unclutter the view there. So let's see, if I just, I'm going to duplicate the 2 things now. So we have, let's just scale that up and then sit that next to it. And then maybe actually just subdivide that so we get back to what we need. So let's just take that face now. Maybe that face actually, and duplicate that, and then bring that to be like that. And then if we take a look at this, you can see how sharp the stuff is on this image. In fact, it's going to take a little bit of time to actually catch up. But there's what I'm actually looking at the moment. Let me hide everything else, actually. So it's actually, I'm just going to move everything out of the way. So we're only looking at these 2 things. So let's say you had some sort of wall and there was a pillar in between that wall. And so you can see there's an A1 on this sort of automatic color grid that you get for just to help with texturing and unwrapping. On the left-hand side, you have this tiling A1 happening several times, and on the right hand side I've now placed it. It'll take a little bit of time before it catches up, but on the right hand side I have this very, very blurry version of that A. But you're just going to have to imagine that on the one hand you have sort of just 128 pixels in the texture being stretched across an amount of image that is set across the screen, which is maybe not as many. So you can almost see the amount of, you can almost see every pixel,
right,
in the every sort of I guess just pixel of the texture on one of them, whereas on the other one, on the one where you're getting lots of the A1 tiling, you know, that looks fine, that looks really crisp. So you can kind of see how one is very blurry, one isn't, basically, and it's just because of the way that you're trying to stretch pixel information beyond a pixel in the texture beyond a pixel in the screen, on the screen. It's really very confusing. It sounds really confusing, doesn't it? But it's not.
Yeah, it does, really, like talking in circles a bit. No, I'm just teasing.
Yeah. It's just because let's say you've got you're working with a 1080 screen, and you have basically about a 1024 image. Let's say you have a 1024 texture, you know, is going to fit across from bottom to the top of your monitor. That's fine. But as soon as you start to zoom in on that, you're now going to get some blurriness, because the screen is having to blur in between those pixels because you don't have that information anymore. You're now stretching as the game's character perhaps is going closer to that wall. It's a 1024 texture, but now you're stretching like half of that texture, like 512, across the whole screen, your 1080 view. And so for every second pixel, it's going to have to blur something on the screen to get it to work. So you get all this bilineal filtering happening behind the scenes to kind of blur it out, rather than it looking like that very, very old 8-bit style where you don't get any of that filtering. You just get the actual blocks.
Right. All
You
right.
know, so if you basically zoom out, if you have enough information in your texture, you're not stretching it or anything, and that's kind of what is meant by texel density. So for example, in Lego City, when we worked on that game, we had to say, well, basically this amount of space, so we had 2 meters in the real world, or in the engine of the world, 2 meters would be 512, and we'll basically try and stick to that.
Right. Right.
So that would be how you would work. That the reason that that's important is because if somebody thinks, oh great, I've got this texture, you can then swap it out with another brick texture, say, and you know that your resolution is going to be about right, and it's not going to be like a brick looks like it's the size of, you know, a chair. You know
Right
what I mean?
on. Right.
You know, so that is something that is really important to get a grasp of, is your scale in the scene. These are things that you do straight away when you're given. That's part of what I probably should have mentioned early on, is that you need to indicate your scale, and that's why I was saying about the block out, that sort of stuff. You want to get all that out as quick as you can, as simply as you can, because then you get all those big problems out of the way.
So this is like when the texel. Let me make sure I'm saying that right, because I've been saying
Yeah.
texture. This is if you're working in the studio where you're expected to do, you know, maybe concept modeling, texturing. This could come in handy if you have more, you know, a couple of 3D artists that are bringing their concepts from, you know, on paper all the way to in game to make the.
Yeah.
So it sounds like
Yeah.
this is pretty much what you would establish. Like, hey, 512 map represents 7 by
Yes.
7 feet of information. So keep
Yes.
that in mind.
Yes.
To keep the
Yeah.
continuity right. Brilliant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I've got open it'll probably get there in a second, I think, because of the like, but I've got open like a block out of that other game that I was playing through before, that I'm putting out, but or at least once I've essentially put all the modular pieces in. I'll probably do that in Unreal Engine 4, by the way.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, you got a
So
quick question from the chat from Fat Pep. He's asking questions like crazy, which is brilliant. All right, his question is, what do you think about these new kind of games where you create environments on consoles, aka Project Spark? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Can it give a false impression of what the 3D artist's work actually is? And then we have another question. Do you think game development field is oversaturated? So you can answer those in any order you'd like.
yeah, I'm not too familiar with the former part there as to what that entails, but yeah, I have a nephew who was playing through a game, and we were talking about environment art, and it took me a little while before I realized that his impression of what environment art was essentially like taking an already existing art pack and then essentially just moving that around.
All right, so it's pre-made, and it's like pretty much like a Lego set, not pun intended.
Yes,
it's like
exactly,
take
yeah.
this house, take these 10 houses, and make a village, and take these roads and lamps.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
The way the Epic art team, I believe, works, you have kind of like level designers which have to have a good eye for art, because they essentially lay a lot of that art out. But for the artists, essentially their job is to make modular sets. So and then a few hero pieces. So you would have, you know, the way that they would work was to, you can tell that the level designer there is using this already. So they were, so my nephew in that example, you know, they were thinking more like an environment artist is a level designer.
Right.
You can see what I mean.
Right. So the confusion is, he was thinking that all you do is just get these pieces, throw them together, and you have a level, where that's the level designer blocking out and then handing it over to the environment artist and saying, hey, these 4 blocks represents A, B, C, D. It's your job to replace them with the final assets.
Yes, yeah.
Wow. Right.
And to answer the other question, yeah, probably it is. The game development scene probably is oversaturated, because of things like the distribution platform is basically, there's about 3. Or at least, you know, like there's 3, like the main ones really, you know, in terms of the way people think about that, like the iTunes and the App Store, and you've got the Google Play, and then you've got Steam. And to get noticed on those, you know, like a lot of people who just work on, say, games for the iPhone or the iPad or something, they lament the idea that if we don't get featured, we're dead. You know, we make no sales.
Right.
But having said that, there are other ways to obviously get noticed, but that means you're going to have to, if you're like a small indie team, I think you pretty much, unless you get lucky, I think if you want a more reliable source of a reliable chance of success. Unfortunately, you have to fuse all your art and passion and creation and environment design and all those sorts of more artistic leaning things with more business head type stuff with like marketing. You know what I mean? You have to start picking up marketing books or
Right.
following marketing blogs and things like that to basically get ideas on how to get seen and get noticed and cut through the cracks of whatever is out there. Start basically like getting out there, getting on forums, getting onto things like what we're doing now, like chatting with the guys on the stream there, asking questions and getting into things like polycount and things like that, and just essentially being visible is the point. Whereas I've seen other people basically just take their passionate project and keep it so hidden because they're so worried that somebody's going to steal their idea.
Right.
But that's not really how things work. It's not, people aren't, there isn't that poverty of ideas out there, really. There isn't a poverty of ideas. There's everybody's got an idea, and it's usually, well, I mean, I guess someone somewhere is probably going to see an idea and think, hey, that's really good, so I want to do that
and snatch it up a bit.
yeah, I guess that does happen a little bit, but I don't see that as being likelihood of it's sort of a threat, because it's so hard to put to full fruition. You have to really enjoy doing what you're doing, and really, if you're doing your own ideas, and that puts you in a unique set there to actually fulfill what you want to do. That actually is a point for doing anything, to mastering anything, like pushing through and getting past those plateaus in 3D art creation or whatever, like actually getting to that point where you don't give up.
Right.
That's the kind of thing, you have to just be really into it.
You just gotta push through, right?
Yeah.
One more. It looks like I have another question in the stream, and I'll ask my question behind it. Do you use life-size scaling while modeling? So to add on to that, when you're modeling a scene as an environment artist, how do you maintain, like if you're modeling a car and you have to model something else in that same scene, how do you maintain the scale? What do you use? Do you use real life measurements or?
Yeah, well, you can either just stick to the grid, or you can put in a few helper objects. Like, let's see. I mean, I've got in this scene, which you'll see in a minute, you can kind of bring in some stuff. You might have some stuff lying around already, which you can bring in. So you might have a car already that is it's to scale. In TT Fusion, they'd have a minifig. So you would just import in the minifig, or you would just import in a few basic. In fact, what you would sometimes, what I used to do sometimes, was actually import several elements of my previous level. Like, so that's the wall there, or that's like a small section of the scene, and just put that on reference for a bit. So it would have maybe a door in it, and it would have a lamppost in it, or it would have whatever.
Right.
But I have a scene here which I'm gonna try and keep in. I guess just to hopefully keep things smooth in the stream here.
I think you can actually show the textures. I think it was just one user having problems following it and jumpy, and if it gets jumpy, we'll let them. We'll switch. We can switch back to wireframe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay.
But we got one more question. How do you get measurements of the objects? I believe this is a question towards
in
Blender.
The first place.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, in the measurements, if I take a look in here, everywhere you have, and let's go to this object tab. You have the, locations here, scale. In fact, if I in the main 3D view, if I just press N to bring up the property sidebar, you have the location information, you've got rotation, you have scaling, you also got dimensions as well, which is independent of whatever you happen to have scaled. So in here, you can see that I guess there's some object somewhere. Like if I can try and highlight this object, you can see that the dimensions of this change, and there are scaling things that I've done with this as well. But basically in Blender, 0.1 unit is 1 meter, and you can shift that over here by instead of it just being on none. I just tend to just use none. You can switch that to metric if you want, or if you're crazy, you can put him on Imperial. And just go.
Crazy American. So, interesting point about this. I know it's kind of hard if you're working with multiple.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm glad you made that point. Sorry to interrupt you. That is the point. Is the engine. is it depends on the engine there. You have to get things working for the engine.
You
So
always want to make sure you
yeah,
know where your end result as far as
yeah.
presentation is.
Yes, yeah. So when you export from whatever modeling application, you may need to do something like times by 100 at that point. Usually in the export process, you have some other options and you can just, fine tune that. Or then you might have to freeze it, you might have to rotate it, you might have to change the pivot point, you might have to do this, that, and the other to it. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. I mean, if people are interested in follow along with the sort of stuff that I do, probably maybe the best way is, you've got like CG Masters on Facebook. If you hit me up on that, I post on that a lot. So if you want to ask questions and stuff, or on the site itself about this sort of stuff, I mean, I've got this game intro stuff. I've
All right.
got the game dev stuff that I'm
Let me
doing.
just let me just jump in there really quick. If you could pull
Yeah,
back up
sure.
your Facebook page so people
Oh,
can
okay.
make sure you guys follow. He's doing this out of the kindness of his heart, so at least we can do is follow. And let me just plug that
Yeah.
link into the chat, facebook.com. Make sure you guys give him a follow. And yeah, sorry, I just
Thanks,
want to
dude.
put that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no, that would be cool. Yeah, I mean, I really like chatting with people and answering and finding and trying to help people. Really, that's what one of the main reasons that we get on here and we do this stuff is to help people. So, I mean, I have a sort of a kind of a tutorial which was about design documents in reference to that game that I'm trying to make. So you'll hopefully see some extra resources there if you want to get into sort of just creating a basic game. And I've got like the actual document itself that you can jump on if you like. So this is about game design documents, why you would maybe want to do that, why you may not want to do that. And you can kind of see on here what I'm using as my references as well. So you can see there's early screenshots, but there's also just stuff taken from
Wally.
yeah, like images online for how it's going to work, what the end enemy should look like, and references there, and some other games that maybe are hitting something similar. So the heavy fogging that you get.
Let me just jump. Let me just jump in really quick. We kind of skimmed the top of references, and I'm glad you brought this up. So when let's say you're the one that's making the level, how does one put together a good reference board, or I'm not sure the technical term when you're gathering your references. What makes for good references, and how do you separate it? How can you be the most efficient when you're gathering references?
Yeah, that is, I mean, for references, we usually go for a reference board or a mood board or, some terminology like that, or just like it'll be just some image, like it might be a piece of concept, and then there'll be little arrows pointing to those parts of the concept. And then maybe there's images pulled off Google, which you would get, the art lead or art director would establish a lot of that. They would say something like, like this, the kind of brickwork that I'm talking about here is this kind of stuff, or the kind of roads that we're looking for that to go down here is this. And you try and sort of fill in the gaps for the major aspects of the level.
Mm-hmm,
And then then just allow the artist to just roll with it. You do get a massive, it's a surprising amount. You can be given, you can feel in many ways that a lot of this might be restrictive, like, oh, you're just giving it way too much information. And there's going to be it's going to feel like you're not really doing any of your own art. You're not putting any of yourself into it. But it's amazing how many decisions that you have to make just when someone says, I want it to be a brick wall. I want it to be this many bricks. I want it to be fairly broken up. I want it to be fairly old. But I want it to be also, I don't know, sort of this many bricks per line, all that sort of information is still given. You'll find that there's still loads of things that you will still think, oh no, I don't know. Did they want me to do this? Did they want me to do that? There's still so many other things, other questions that you'll find you'll have, even on one really restrictive thing like that. And to be honest, they don't go that detailed. They won't give you that piece of information. You'll feel more like you have too much freedom than not enough.
exactly. All right, we got one question, and I want to segue a little bit deeper into maybe reference, because I think for me personally,
Sure.
that's probably the most important thing. So, John at War asks, does Aidy use Unity 3 ever, and what are your thoughts on the Unity 3D engine?
Yeah, I did. I did briefly. I was using that. I was going to get into that. The reason that the Unity free, the free version, is um, sort of has some restrictions on it, obviously, and the problem with that is, as my passion was to make a game, or I wanted to make a game which was more of a first person perspective. Um, and so the problem with that is, if you're going to go into that in Unity, you're probably not going to be able to use the free version, because the stuff that you need, like occlusion culling and the optimization that you're going to need to go through, you're probably not going to be able to do it with the free version. Some of that stuff is cut out of it, from my understanding of the last time I checked anyway. Unreal Engine 4, on the other hand, you've got $18 and you're away, and you have no limitation really. So that was it's very suited for that kind of stuff, the first person stuff, and it's very user friendly from an artist's point of view to attempt to complete a game. So you have that visual workflow, which is more
A lot of visual
blueprints
is brilliant. I'm glad that they put that in there. But let's jump into if you have time. I know we're running a bit hot. Would you be able to, maybe you can use the internet to pretend like you've gotten a concept image, and how you would analyze it and break it down? Because I just want the viewers to understand, and even myself, like if somebody hands you a concept art, like we were talking the other day, what kind of questions are you going to be, asking that person? So just if you could go through it and just pull something up.
Let's see. I'm just going to look for just any concept, if I can just find some sort of concept art thing. Let's see if we can find that. There you go, concept art. Let's hope that this works.
We're pushing the limits of the stream here.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's just look at any piece. Oh, I know actually. Let's see. Let's just go to the gallery. Actually, that might be good. On here. So I'll try and pull up just some sort of environment gallery thing. Let's see if this is...
All right, looks like while you're looking for that, we got one question from 404 Vault related to references. As an artist, how often do you hand sketch the assets you're about to build, or do you always rely on concept artist works? So how many times do you find yourself actually drawing, the stuff that you're about to model?
As in on paper?
Yeah, just sketching digital on paper.
Yeah, actually, it's a surprising amount. Even if you're actually not that great at it, you'll probably do that just to solve some problems. Sometimes that is just faster to just work it out on paper a little bit, like the design of something, like the silhouette of something. Or you might, just Photoshop that or something like that. So, quite a lot actually. So for example, you remember the thing I was talking about where I was given 2 pieces of concept work art for the interior of the Statue of Liberty. The top part and the bottom part wouldn't, it's like the first level and the second level, they don't mix. They don't. You couldn't get from level 1 to level 2. It's impossible to actually build that. So I did a lot of sketching out stuff on paper to try and figure out how an engineer would potentially try and make that work. And really, I'm sure a real engineer would go, whoa, that's never going to work. But it looked like it would work enough for 3D.
Right.
So,
all right. So it looks like you got a concept. So you got this from your environment artist, and he says, all right, Aidy.
Yeah.
Do it.
So, yeah. So as you can see on here, what you've got is a figure, first of all. So that the first question you're going to have is actually, how big is that, obviously. So is this, so you have a lot of concept artists will put in some sort of clue. So you'll either have birds or people, something very, very recognizable to help indicate the scale. So you have that. You'll notice that at first glance, it seems like a lot of stuff and a lot of information is given here, but there's a lot of information that you're going to have to ask the level designer straight away. And Jamel, could you imagine what you might ask? What if you've got the level designer? What was one of the first things that you might ask for this?
Oh, me, you're putting me on the
Yeah.
spot. I'd probably ask, where is this? It looks like it's in the jungle. I want to know
Yeah.
what kind of, like, for me personally, I want to know what's the mood. If it's deep in the jungle, it looks like I would think it would be kind of like a desolate kind of feel to it, like isolated, as
Yeah.
opposed to if it's just on the edge of a city, because from this angle, I'm looking just at the woods, but if it's in 3D, the person's probably going to be able to walk around this structure. So what's on the
Exactly. Yeah.
what's on the other side? Is it the middle of the
Yes.
forest? That's what
That's
I would
right.
ask.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Now that's exactly the point. It's like, what's the game camera gonna do? How much are you actually gonna see of the scene? You see these trees in the background. Do you actually walk through those? Are you gonna have to walk through those, or as you walk towards them, it enters a cutscene, and then that's the end of the level? Or you know what I mean? There's a few things that could happen there. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of questions that you would immediately have to ask. Now, the thing is, you might have a level meeting about this where a lot of there's a chance to ask those questions, and that will have people like VFX guys, animators, the level designer, the concept artist, the art lead, the design lead, and it might be quite a big room full of people all discussing the main designer of the whole game might be in there, basically helping sort of guide the direction, because somebody could come up with a really good idea and it could be like, oh yeah, we should do that actually, or we should start to pull that in, or yes, like that helps with the rhythm and the theme of what we're going for, yeah, run with it or whatever. So for example, in this game, maybe the ferns are some pickup. You know what I mean? So you might have to think, hang on a minute, this going to be confusing? How is the player going to know that? How am I going to distinguish my assets from stuff that you interact with in a much more meaningful gameplay mechanic? Like again, just because I've been reading up on a lot of Naughty Dog recently, it's like you would have something which gets, and also they're a really good example because they are so renowned as being so professional and such a high standard. You would still get those guys go through their workflow, and at the very, very end, realize that something doesn't work anymore and have to sort of start back on a few levels, even though you went through the block out, you went through your first pass, second pass, final art, all those reviews. You had all this really cool sort of pipeline process, technical workflow, these tutorials, like a team of environment artists, as they work through, they find a really cool method of creating vines. And so that person might well do a tutorial, and you'll sometimes see these sorts of things on Polycount where they share this stuff, and it's basically, this is the workflow we should do for creating some fast amount of populate a whole scene with all these vines. And so what might happen is you might start to try and figure out how you're going to go about doing that, and then yeah, write up a tutorial, and then everybody else can follow it, because the art director is going, I want all of them to look basically like this. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
So you then have almost like a tutorial to follow, where it's like, yeah, more of this sort of stuff. And then somebody might go, well, in this scene, all the vines are now snowing. So how are we going to do that? Is that going to be procedurally done? Is that going to be in a texture? Is that going to be just, oh, we'll just, that's a shader? Is the tech art guy going to do that? Or is it a tech artist guy who's going to do that?
Right. So it sounds like when you're handed, quote unquote, handed this, you're not literally like handed this, like they walk up to your desk and say, "Hey, AD, here you
Exactly.
go."
Yeah.
There's
Yes.
actually a meeting, like, okay, here's the new
Yeah.
level. These
Yes.
people are going to work on it,
Yeah.
and then you're
It's,
sitting there.
to be honest, what I did was I'd walk up to the concept artist the other way. It would be the other way around. I'd go up to the concept artist and I'd say, "Hey, is this that level that I'm going to have to work on?" Right, okay, this looks confusing. Or I'd kind of be like, oh, this is so cool, this what's that, I'd basically want to preempt it. I would ruin it for me, so I wouldn't get that big hit of like, wow, this is amazing. I would
So you
sort
open
of,
up presents before Christmas, pretty
yes,
much.
yes, exactly, yeah. I couldn't wait. I would always look at that. I would always look at this sort of stuff and sort of talk about it with the designer and say, oh wow, I'd see their block out, I'd see what they were doing. That they would use SketchUp. Actually, they had a whole host of artists, designers, sorry, using SketchUp, which is why I mean, now it's a no-brainer. You know, you should be, most studios should probably be using Blender in some way because it's free and it gives the designers a way to use non-procedural geometry creation. You know, so SketchUp isn't quite like Max, Maya, Modo, Blender. It isn't it doesn't perform like that. It isn't polygonal in quite the same way. So your exports out of SketchUp is a bit crazy sometimes.
All right. So you're saying that some environment artists or artists, they would use SketchUp to get sort of their perspective and do like a color overlay on those 3D objects kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we did have a concept artist who was using, you know, he was most familiar with 3ds Max, so he was using 3ds Max in the studio, and then he would paint over those as a concept. A lot of concept artists do that actually. I mean, they take maybe a block out version of it, they block it out themselves just using basic cubes and spheres and things like that, and then they will get perspective, set the camera angle, take a screenshot of that, and then start to paint over it. So they have the scene that they need. And then so in this scene, to break that down, you know, that looks like the sort of, is that like a, you know, you want to get a feel for what surfaces are, the way materials read is really key. So on this one, it's obviously very reflective. So it seems to me like that's like metallic paneling, or maybe even like glassy like paneling. I think it's metallic though in that case. And that goes around the pillar, which is by the figure that is standing next to it. And then, so I would want to figure out if that's a reusable thing. So if I'm having a metal paneling that is repeated, is it repeated on the sort of the sort of overpass area, the sort of bridged area where you kind of seeing it intersect with potentially a T junction there or some sort of L junction.
So while you're breaking this down, do you have like a notepad? Because I've seen, you know, artists, they take this screenshot, put it onto Photoshop, and like you're saying, they're breaking down textures. Is that like a standard on how to break it down? Do you find your repeating parts?
Not necessarily. No, we weren't using a standard system like that. I mean, I would literally, we just have I just used a notepad and pen. I would just sketch out. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to need metal paneling. I'm going to need some vines. I'm going to need some trees. I'm going to need some, let's see, we've got these, maybe some of this is actually cables and not just vines. It's hard to tell directly. This is maybe broken down. So you got ferns coming out of this stuff. So inside, this is all going to be pretty grungy. So I'm going to need, I'll probably put grunge on a separate layer. So that would be, I'd probably make a lot of this reasonably clean and then put grunge on as a separate thing, which is multiplied over.
Like a decal or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but just to break up the tiling of it. So that way I've got something which is going to just be able to break it up. You'll notice in a lot of images that are appealing anyway, they have they play with this scene is playing with a lot of stuff. So to draw, they're emphasizing depth by putting something in the foreground and background there. They've got the color palette is very specific, so you get this very green. It's almost like a single palette, almost like this green with the tint of highlighted yellow. And so that's kind of suggesting that, I mean, this is obviously like water and stuff like that. So you're going to need to come up with some decent sort of pondy looking textures and stuff, as well as, yeah, so you're having, like I say, they have these ferns. So you're going to need to do some foliage, a little foliage kit. And that won't just be here. Foliage, you know, you're going to stick that all over the place. You're going to end up putting that on the ground, maybe really try and push that. And then maybe the art director at that point will go, well, hey, roll that back, or, you know, push it forward or something like that. You know, it depends on what you're going for.
Okay, it looks like we got a question. I'm going to jump back in the stream.
Cool.
You and I kind of went off on a tangent. Scrolling back, looks like Ralphie said, "What is your opinion about working in the game industry? I've heard a lot of horror stories about no job security and bad wages."
The studio that I worked at was probably the most secure studio I've ever seen. that is get there because they release basically a top 10 game every year, if not two. Several, sometimes in the top 20, there's 3 or 4 titles from that studio. So they never seem to, you know, when you're in that situation, you're not really going to worry too much. But yeah, it is. I mean, there is that worry. There's a lot of artists that would go into that studio, would tell horror stories of being pulled into a room and then said, "Oh, by the way, you're not. This is your last day." You know, a whole everybody. And by the way, we can't pay you for the last couple of weeks, or you know, something like that. We're basically bankrupt, or that publishing deal fell through at the last minute. You know, so never mind. You know, we're just going to go down to a skeleton crew or something like that. Then on the other hand, you've got something where people are like, we're definitely going to get something. We can't pay you for the next 3 months, you know, that kind of stuff. Or, you know, I tell you what is more prevalent throughout the industry is just the crunch cycle. That's just something which is almost always going to happen because it's too expensive to not get it done.
So the crunch cycle, you mean like, hey, we're releasing in 3 months, but we got 6 months worth of work to do, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Or just to the point of maybe we've had a test build come back from Sony or Nintendo, and they've said, well, this and this needs to change, and it's not actually because of their legal requirements that they have for every game must fit this standard. And so there's some sort of issue that they have that they're uncomfortable with or something like that. And then now, oh, that's going to set the game back. And that could be something like frame rate. And the reason that that's an issue is because you have this small area of the game where in some crazy situation, they've managed to crunch the frame rate right down because they have all these abilities happening on screen at the same time, so it's rendering too much stuff, and it's something that we didn't think of or something like that. So then you have to think, right, that's a really big problem actually. Now we've only got 2 months to solve it because we have this release schedule and we can't push it back anymore. You get to that point where you just can't push it back anymore.
Right.
TT Fusion, I thought the studio, or TT Games anyway, I felt like their crunch cycles was cool, fine.
Yeah.
You know, there's I mean, you have a bit of that. Maybe there's a few weeks where, you know, you work quite a bit of overtime, but then that's that. Other studios, you know, that's almost never seems to be out of crunch. I mean, there are, you know, there'll be a few people in there which aren't in crunch. I mean, sometimes some of the people that are in crunch because their workflow needs attention. Sometimes, I mean, not to be harsh. I mean, sometimes I'm not if somebody is listening to this and they do happen to be in a crunch and it really isn't their fault, then, you know, I'm not talking about that person. You know, they sometimes it's just, you know yourself when you know you've not done it in the most efficient way, and now you really have to get it done. You know, so.
Right. All right. So going back, jumping on the concept part. So you would take notes on the side about what textures you can repeat. You'd ask the questions of what gameplay area is, you know, what area is the camera going to see. You'd ask, how big is this? If there was no person standing there, you'd ask, what's the size of this?
Exactly.
You know, how far off the ground is this?
Yeah.
So you're pretty much asking the questions that'll help you complete this environment. Is it?
Yeah. And then maybe about 3 trees might actually do it. So if you're building if you're not using some sort of other
Speed
procedural
tree.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. If you're not using something like that, then, you know, if you're going to build everything individually, which is still quite common, you would maybe you're going to need to know how many you're going to do of everything. So you might probably start with something which is a really good usable asset, so you can spin that tree around, or you can take that branch off it, put it somewhere else. You know, maybe it's detachable, and now it gives it the illusion of, you know, how far can you push what you do very, very early on. And then you have like these vines here, that would just be like a sort of a bark texture. So you would just probably use the same texture from the tree on this vine. And then these leaves here that come off it, that would probably be the same texture, which would make up probably some foliage on the ground anyway, some larger bushes.
So it's funny that you said with the trees, when you spin them around, and then you said reusing
Yeah.
the bark from the bigger trees to the vine.
Yeah.
I've mentioned on my stream a couple of times kit bashing, and can you go into that, like from a professional standpoint? You get to a point where you have so much stuff in your library, and then you've done it. Like I've done 500 trees. So how does that, how does that come into play with like kit bashing and
Well,
reusing stuff?
potentially the problem with those trees might be that they're just too high poly or not high enough, because now you're on a next engine. You're now doing PlayStation 4 stuff, your Xbox One stuff. You're now got all this extra budget, and all your old assets aren't really applicable anymore. Or you're actually doing the the iPhone version or something like that, and again, your assets, you're going to need to cut them down or something like that. So you sometimes need to start again on that sort of stuff. But as long as you're sort of by the way, a tip on that is to check out what some artists do in the marketplace, in the Unreal Marketplace or the Unity Asset Store. There's a lot of modular. You can check out the environment art on that, the environment art asset packs on that, and some of the go for the highest paid ones. I think there's a guy called Manufacturer K4 or something like that, and he seems to be making a killing on that site with all that stuff, because his stuff is really quality. And if you take a look at how he breaks it down, you can see really nice videos of the environment art, and really cool. And then you can just sort of scroll through what is included in that asset pack. This many shaders, this many materials, this many versions of rocks, this many versions of trees, this many versions of metal panels and stuff like that. You might find that you can have a metal panel, you can colorize it slightly differently, and suddenly somehow it starts to now look like a totally different texture.
Right.
Or you can like mix it up with some grunge, have a second layer of texture which is on the grunge thing. Now that's an important part of the kit bashing thing. Is what the reason that that's so important is because textures is the killer, not necessarily polygons. Textures is where things start to hit. That's where you'll feel the punch and the pinch.
The pinch, the crunch time, right?
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, it's just another question. Sort of a segue when we get done with this, with the reference art. Fat Pep says, can you talk more about procedural world-based games like Minecraft? Is the 3D artist workflow similar to a standard game where you create every single level by hand? So they're pretty much asking, is like Minecraft similar to the Division in the sense of how you make things, like the workflow?
There's probably, from an art point of view, there'll be core principles at play, which will cross over to anything. So if you're a 2D artist, you're going to find there are things which cross over to that cross over to the 3D world, or the games world, or whatever, or the film world, or doing adverts or whatever. You're going to find there's going to be stuff that crosses over. But in general, I think probably building something in Minecraft probably isn't necessarily that relatable. I'd say that becomes more in level design territory than it does from an environment artist point of view.
Right. Well, and another question, 404 Vault asks, any tips / references on how to think and design assets to be modular? So
yeah, for that, there's an epic guy called Kevin Johnston. You should check out his stuff. That's let me see if I can try and find his. In fact, come to think of it, I have actually got some links on. I did a tutorial on CG Masters for modularity. In fact, I've put the links on there.
If you want to drop it in, I can drop it into the chat for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so I'm on that page anyway, but I need to put it on here so you can get it.
Right. You have to give it up to me so I can give it to the viewers.
Yeah. This is pretty key stuff, really, from a modular point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at that. Modularity. And also, the reason I did this tutorial is because of the angles, and it's actually very, very simple to be able to basically create a massive environment really, really quickly, so long as you're prepared to do it on the grid. And it's so easy to kind of miss that, to kind of not say, oh, it doesn't really matter. It's not, oh, just tweak that a little bit, or but it's fine to hide things with pillars and textures and
Seams
scenes and
and
stuff
yeah.
like that. Yeah, that happens. That's fine. But sometimes, if you'll find that, like for example, in this game that I'm doing, what I want to be able to do is sort of future-proof it in a way, so I can kind of go, right, I want to extend it now. I want to do another level, but it's not going to take me that long now to build all the other levels because I have the basic core done.
Right.
So yeah.
So
So it just becomes fun then. It does. You just do an occasional bit of you just do a little bit of something, a little bit of a cool game idea, and then you're actually implementing it fast. It's all the fun. You basically get it down to just the fun stuff and the one or two unique assets. So. Oh yeah, and I also got to this Pythagorean theorem on that tutorial. I was very proud of myself. That was
nice. The math.
Yeah,
let's see.
yeah.
Frostbite198 asks, do you have any tips on what engine is the best for making an engine? So let me rephrase that. So what engine is the best for making games, or would you make an engine yourself? I believe that.
I had a friend actually who was making a game, and he was very tempted to make the game engine himself with a friend. But I would personally, I think it's worth spending that money on something else, because you'll find, I mean, let's say time is money. So what is your time worth? How long would it take you to create an engine like Unreal Engine, for example? Probably a long time, but I can't do it. I can't do that anyway. I couldn't do that on my own. I certainly could. In fact, who am I kidding? I couldn't do that if I cloned myself 100 times. I wouldn't do that.
You're an artist, right?
Make that engine, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. They were interested in Kevin Johnston. You mentioned somebody. Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a link for his site?
Yeah. So the link for him is, I should have, you can see there's 2 links at the bottom of that. That link I shared to you.
Right.
On the page.
Okay, they've got it.
Got it somewhere. Yeah. At the bottom of that, there's a result. It's only small. It's just a small resources bit, and it says "Want to know more." It's just
Would
after
you like to know more?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just after the really, really cool Pythagorean theorem.
Just bread and butter right there. That's your.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big deal for an artist. Put math on
exactly. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I'm so proud of that. Like, hey, I've actually done math, and here I am. In actually there's so many people that are going to be proud of me right now. It's like school was not a complete, well, actually I didn't learn that in school though. That's the problem. Right. But still, it's only since becoming an artist and getting into games that I've really gotten into that. I've had to learn stuff like that. If only somebody had told me that games were so used in maths and stuff, I may have paid more attention.
Right.
But yeah, at the bottom there, you'll see there's 2 main links. There's one from Polycount, and that is a general link that's got loads of stuff in it. And from that list there, if you dig into it, there's a Kevin Johnston link, and that's actually a download file for a presentation I think that he did, and that's like a PDF. No, it's not a PDF. It's either a PDF or some sort of PowerPoint thing. And that's a good thing to get more on Kevin Johnston. The other thing is to just search for his name, and you'll find him showing up on Polycount a lot, and he will break down a lot of the stuff that he did on the Epic games. So yeah, we had an art director at TT Fusion which worked with him, because he used to before he worked as an art director at TT Fusion, he worked at Epic, so there was a lot of information being passed along there. That was, in terms of workflow and stuff.
Industry secrets.
Absolutely, we're not going to share those things. That's for us and us alone.
All right, so we've got sort of the workflow. How do you break down a reference? I think the sensible next step is, after you've gotten to your studio, you've learned how they do business. What's a typical day? Say you're just starting a new project, and what's sort of like the timeline as an environment artist, as a 3D artist? What are you expecting? Do you come in, check in with your boss, or do you just get to your desk and get to work, or what's the
Some days you'll literally just come in, get the headphones on, start listening to some podcasts or some music, and then just work. Just work on just building the scene some more. You know, maybe that day you're concentrating on doing the cliffs, or you know, something like that, or it's all just texture. You know, you're going to do a lot of Photoshop that day, or you're going to be in ZBrush or ZBrush, as some people might call it,
as we say.
So yeah, you know, that just depends. Yeah, but on other days you might do a lot of just meetings and stuff because you know it's preliminary stuff or something. But a typical thing would be you would get to a point and you really have to know when to ask a question or when not to ask a question. That's basically the skill that you'll have. So when I first started as a junior, it was a case of I was given a piece of concept art, which was a circle, and that was, it said lake on it or something, and then there was a line across it that said bridge, and then there was when it said, right, okay, so there's going to be a troll on that bridge there, and then later on it was like, oh, that bridge is going to be broken, but there was no you know, it was not concept as I'd come to understand what concept was. It was just, you know, like from a designer, it was just, okay, a couple of circles, a line here, a line there. That's the perimeter, you know. So it was something which, you know, anyone could have, you know, sort of said, you know, you could stop someone on the street and say, hey, tell me to make a level, you know, and you've got 5 seconds to do it. You know, the result of that would have been what I had received.
Well, in that situation, I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off. In that situation, say if you're that junior level artist or environment artist, and they hand you that, what questions should you ask in that situation?
What is this dark? Is this, you know, all the stuff that you can't see? It's like, what time of day is it? What is the population of stuff? Is this a lot of rocks on this? Is this very dusty, dark? What sort of textures? What's the main textures on the floor, the walls? You know, what sort of stuff? Is this a wooden bridge? Is it, or is it a stone bridge, or is it a, you know, like those sorts of questions? So yeah, you dig a little bit deeper, and then you just get on with it. And then you now I'm not saying that that's like a real hardship or anything, because obviously they have to be sensible and know that they have given you something which is very easy to fail with. And the only reason they've given you that is because you're a junior, they don't know you that well, and they've just not got time to give to you at that point. So for example, at that time they were in crunch when they gave me that, so they just didn't have the time to do it. So I just had to be a little bit, you know, sort of just detect what it was that. So the thing I did was go to another artist that seemed to have a little bit more time to talk and say, how do I break this down? So I just asked another artist.
So ask questions.
I remember another friend who was in a studio had a problem with another artist because basically they just would never ask any questions about anyone. They just sit on the problem, and it would just get worse and worse and worse. You know, like they just had to, because what was more important to them was the idea of conveying that they knew everything. If you see what I mean, because it felt like you're in this really competitive industry, everybody's after your job. I have to show that I have no weakness.
I'm impervious, right?
I think that's what it was. But it's not like that. It's actually pretty friendly environment if you get in the right studio.
Right.
You shouldn't settle. If you think that you're being mistreated and it's not that good enough, you know, you're probably right. It's probably should sort out they should sort out their attitude.
So pretty much you're saying, if I may do like a quick overview, if you get this concept piece and you're a character artist, you're an environment artist, you need to ask as many questions as you have to feel confident to make that, pretty much.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Right.
Good.
Brilliant.
Good, yeah.
All right, so we got a question. We got a couple of questions. We have two. The professional novice, brilliant name. What kinds of freelance work is most common for you? And then 404 Vault says, how do you pretty much, I'm gonna give you a quick synopsis of his question because it's quite long. How do you keep up with organizing your photos and your sketches and all that? What softwares or what methods do you use to keep that all together?
For that, I'll answer that one first. It's basically just a case of having folder structures. So on the one hand, you've got textures and resources and maybe tutorials and stuff that you've kept on one side. And then so yeah, there's no sophisticated piece of software really. Maybe a bit of Google Drive, just a document which is just allows me to make sure that I don't lose it or it doesn't get corrupt, and stick some information on there. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, so it's you know, you just have to pick up some structure, folder structure for organizing your own textures, repositories, and just take it from there. I mean, I'm pretty unorganized like that, to be honest. I just kind of go, oh, it's in here somewhere, and then maybe I'll do a search.
Well, what I use, I don't mean to jump in. What I use my phone, and it automatically backs up, online to Google Drive. But I also use Pinterest, and I make my boards. If I'm working on, say, the level I'm working on is in the desert, so I have like different boards, like desert reference, desert vegetation.
Yeah, listen to Jamel on that then. That's good.
Just so I'm not just like I have to go Google and get out of the mood, because I got one track mind. Once I'm in the zone, I just I like to go. But this time,
per project I usually keep a folder in there called reference, and I have like loads of subfolders which are the important points of it. So I'll have so for example, on that game I have like stuff from films is one folder, stuff from Google Images is another, stuff from Street View, Google Maps is another, stuff like that. So I can, and then I'll make mood boards from that. So that's, like a Photoshop document or a Critter document or GIMP document, or, any 2D application like that should be able to make that very easy. And then just set that up, just have things that you can see. I wonder if I've got that blend file where I had the game like this. Yeah, this is real. I mean, look at how simple this mood board is. If you when you get a chance to see this, this is not for public consumption. This is not meant to be something which is like, hey, check out how good my mood boards are. This is just something which has just got little rough details that I wanted in an alleyway. And this is, in particular, the stage that I'm at right now is building in these sort of crevices. So everything in the buildings isn't so flat. So I'll have something which is a little sort of section which is sort of recessed. But in general, the alleyway will be fairly straight because I don't want to confuse the player too much.
Right. So the breakdown of your mood board or your reference board here, it looks like you've got one overall kind of picture showing the flow, and then you've got little snippets of maybe doorways and stuff like that.
Yeah. So check out this image on the very far right. You'll see that the main reason I've done that is because, first of all, there's this cool little wooden board which should be fairly easy to knock up from probably assets I've already made. And just stick that on the side. Plus, there's this just really interesting kind of small joint between the two buildings. So I can have this gap here, which is kind of interesting with this little railing at the top. So I thought I'd put something in like that. Plus, there's this trim that goes around the ground level of this building, which I thought was pretty cool. And then this thing here, you've got all just the way that the drain pipes are working, the guttering of the building is interesting. The silhouettes that you get in, that you can see kind of coming down the line there with the satellite dishes, and just some of the ideas of just how this is run down and just kind of recessed at areas. So you got these few windows up here. Are they level? That kind of stuff.
All right. So it sounds like I'm just looking at the chat here. 404 Vault says he makes his mood boards, but sometimes he gets lost on what to put on the board. Like, what references should he pull to it?
Well, that's the questions. I mean, that's the point from where you get early on, you end up having a series of questions that you need to ask. So like we were saying, like with the designer that just gave that circle and then put a line across it and said, that's the bridge, you know, that you kind of go, okay, well, what bridge? So you would get the bridge. You want an image of a bridge maybe and maybe that bridge that you've got an image of is the size of it. Maybe it's an image of maybe you'll couple that with another image, which is a picture of the type of stone. So the image that you've got for the scale, you like the scale, but you don't like the stone. So you almost like make a collage of aspects of a bridge, and you kind of go, okay, so what's a bridge fundamentally all about? Excuse me, from a how are you going to build that? How are you going to actually, when you get down to actually building it, hopefully the questions then will become apparent. So maybe just imagine you are actually now sat in front of the computer about to build whatever it is that you're trying to build. Otherwise, if you don't know what to build, even at that stage, you need to take a step back in reference. So you now need to go, and instead of finding an image of a bridge, you need to now go back and find an image of, let's say it's set in World War II. You need to start looking at World War II images.
Right.
You know what I mean? Until you hone, okay, that's an area that I want to know. That's what I'm looking for, that sort of stuff. But it's too run down. It can't be that run down, or it's too clean. I need to make it look like it's destroyed. So now you need to find a mood board on destroyed concrete.
So
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So it sounds like, if I may,
you could have sub mood boards.
Yeah, right. This seems like you're filling your mood board up when you're asking those questions. Like you said, bridge. So what kind of bridge? It could be a rope bridge. It could be a stone arch bridge.
Exactly,
and then, okay, stone arch bridge. I fill up a mood board with stone arch bridge. Is it broken? Oh, it's broken. Okay, what is broken cement or broken bridge? You know.
Yeah, because you might be wanting to sculpt that. You know, that kind of broken detail, you know, you might be thinking, well, this is going to be sculpted. So you want a really good close-in detail of what you're actually going to do on that. I'll tell you another idea is actually just look at other mood boards that have already been created by people that have been shared online.
So the thought process of making it.
Yeah, just type in, you know, I guess maybe just type it into image searches, stuff like mood board or environment mood board or game mood and game, you know, texture sheet or something like that, you know, like which would show you the textures that were used in that level.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, I was just that was it. Yeah.
Well, I was just to jump back in. I know we're talking about mood boards. So the broken bridge, it just popped a question, and this is a question from Jamel. So you're making this bridge, and it's, you know, obviously the scale of a bridge, and you've got a piece that's broken. So when you're modeling this, what's a proper process of breaking that up modularly?
Well, that might not be. I mean, you might actually just have, in a way, a kind of a hero piece, which which is like, you know, it stands alone.
Right.
You know, like so.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, you would model the whole bridge, and then you would just lop off that end that's, you know, broken, take that into ZBrush or ZBrush, and you know, for our friends across the
it sounds so strange in your accent.
Right, ZBrush. I can't believe it. I have an accent. Nice. But you would lop off that end, and you know, just ZBrush that end. Is that practical, or is that practice? You know?
Yes, it is. Yeah. That's a good way of doing it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Get down. Let's keep doing that. But
I mean, it depends, because when you've got a scene, like I was saying before, it's the textures that kill it. So you might only have space for the unique texture bit for the rubble at the end. You might not have room for I guess the rest of it. So you look elsewhere in the scene. What is already being rendered by the CPU and the GPU? What's already being taken care of? So you might then find a cement texture which might just do for some of that rubble. You know, you might end up sculpting it, but actually only using the mesh, and then just using a tiling dirt texture that goes on top of it, and then that's that.
Right.
It might be that's it. And then you stick a little bit of geometry out of it, like like a rebar thing or something.
Sort of to break up the attention to that unintentional seam that you have when those two pieces connect. Maybe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Let's see. So we're concept boards. I just want to make sure you're answering everybody's questions. I think that we've covered pretty much all the questions and
No
everybody.
way, really.
Yeah, we've 2 hours here, so
Wow, wow.
it's been fun. It's chatting, yeah. But if you can think of anything, yeah, go ahead and I will just listen. We're eating it all up. Everybody's just like on pins and needles, like, what is he gonna say now? Like, let me write it down. But um, I think that what okay, let me take a step back. When you're beginning, what's the most important thing when you're starting off? Let's say you've been hunting and lurking around poly count and you've heard
Yeah,
about Blender and you're like
yeah.
you're fresh and you're like, I want to be an environment artist. What's some of the practices that you would suggest to somebody beginning? Like, you should do ABC to get the most time, most efficient workflow and spend your time wisely. What's some of the things that you did or would you recommend doing?
First of all, you need to know what I mean, for me, I wanted to be very practical and get into the industry as quick as possible because I felt like it would be like that thing of, as we talked about before, like that metaphor of learning to drive. And it's only once you really get on the road without an instructor and all the rest of it that you really feel like your learning begins. It's just natural. It's just wisdom and experience and all the rest of it. But what I wanted to do was really get into that point as quickly as possible, get into the studio as quickly as possible. So what did that mean? So I would work backwards from that. So that meant, what's the lowest role I could go for? And so you check out the junior art level positions for environment artists and try and track down their portfolios, see what they look like, so you know what you're up against. What's the standard at the moment for that? And then make sure that your stuff looks as good, but maybe has more interesting, unique ideas to it. Something which is almost like, that's, they're not going to forget that, or that's going to stand out in some way. And that comes into, like more like marketing yourself. That's
Right.
what a portfolio is
Right.
marketing yourself.
A
So maybe,
representation.
yeah, yeah, you might need to, but yeah. So then, getting more specific on that though, I would then start looking at, yeah, definitely look at poly count, look at some, getting started. If you're just totally new to stuff and you're new to Blender or whatever, just find some series of getting started type tutorials and go through them. It's particularly to what you want to do. So if you want to be a modeling and texturing artist, just you ignore all the rendering and the animation stuff,
And just
and
texture.
yeah, yeah, just do the modeling stuff. Just find a load of really good modeling stuff and just get into it, and then you'll find that leads you to other places, and that leads you to other places, and yeah, you could just, I mean, some of the best stuff will be paid
Right.
for content,
Right.
but some of there are loads and loads of really good free stuff out there as well. And like I
Right.
said, like in particular on CG Masters, that's what I'm building up now, is attempting to fill this free tutorials stuff up. Where is that? So yeah, with stuff like, how did I do that tiling texture, using particles and a lot of the physics and things. So I duplicated a load of coins, dropped them into a box, uh, uh, duplicated that 4 times, and then there you go. You've got your texture. Then rendered that from above, and then baked out a couple of things. So you kind of get to see down here
Oh,
the
okay. That's cool.
so you get like the normal map. I got an occlusion bake out of it, and then that's like a basic diffuse. And these are like procedural shaders as well. So Blender is quite big on its old procedural shaders. Like, that is an indication. This gold is
Wow.
just, that's just a procedural
Is
shader in
that
there.
is that PBR? Is that
Yeah,
Blender?
it is.
Brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. It's not real time though. This is like actual. It's pretty fast. Don't get
Mhm.
me wrong. But it's they're in Blender. Blender is getting its own PBR real time view in the next 6 months or so. Oh, no, sometime in 2015.
Oh, so it's going to be like Maya's viewport 2.0 where you can actually see it.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. Oh, that's
Yes,
amazing.
that's
Right.
right. Yeah, yeah. You know, like Marmoset and Unreal Engine 4 and stuff like that. You know, you have that real time sort of view of your and Substance Designer and all that sort of stuff. You know, you have that, you want that real time view,
Right.
but you know, it may not be like perfectly real time. It's pretty close, like I say. You know, it just sort of you have to give it just a few seconds to render to get it to be really crisp. But you know, you can kind of go, okay, you know, that this is, you know, you can see there's a little bit of smudginess going on and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the node setup. So that is just an object, and that's the node. So you can see that for metal objects, for metal shaders, you want a colored reflection. So this is driving the reflection, this glossy shader, and then that's being mixed. These two shaders are being mixed together, and you have the material output then. So that's the end of the chain. The input, the start of it really is here, and that is dictating just adding a little bit of noise to the roughness of the, you know, so the rougher the highlight, the more sort of blurry the reflection is. And you can kind of tell that on that little square there. You not only get the fact that that's a white light in the scene, and I'm using an image-based texture as well. So that's just an environment texture.
Right.
So,
and that image base is we're dropping an industry word. I don't want people to get thrown off by
okay.
IBL.
Yes. Yeah.
Could you explain what IBL is?
Yeah, that's just you have like an environment texture, which essentially is like a spherical map, or that's how it appears when you're in the world anyway, when you're in the 3D scene, and you can look around and see that is affecting your object. So in other words, the lighting of the texture or the room basically is affecting the object in the way that you would expect that object to be lit if you really were in that room. So yeah, that's basically the image-based lighting is like that.
Beautiful. One and done. All right, looks like we have a viewer in here that says it's a small world because Aidy was in my college class last year talking. Oh, at St. Helens College.
St. Helens?
Yeah,
Wow,
right.
no way. No
Wow,
way,
imagine
yeah.
that. A small world. The internet
Yeah.
connects us all.
Yes. Good grief.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think I would actually, I said three things at once. I apologize. If there's anything else you want to cover, by means, we're all here. We're all ears. I know it's getting kind of late for you, but before you go, I do want to, if you can, show us your scene and Blender, because I think personally, from what I've heard, Blender gets a bad rap as not being as good as 3ds Max, and we've had probably maybe 10 more people jump in, and there's a lot of people there on the, you know, in the middle of the road with Blender or something else. And I think if you showed your scene with the textures
okay.
yeah, it's you get a real appreciation, because we're really hard pressed as, you know, beginners to find amazing work in Blender. And you know, like you're always you know, you do 3D environment art, and then people say I've done it in 3ds Max or Maya. I think Blender gets a bad rap, and you're displaying it beautifully. I mean, this looks like straight out of like Unity 4, and this is in engine, so this is just marvelous.
That's right. Yeah, and I have to forgive, this is very sort of laggy on my laptop, because this is a very old laptop, and I don't normally work on this laptop. So normally it's like super silky smooth, but it's very, very chuggy at the moment, just because, like I say, this is the the laptop's fault, really.
Oh yeah, maybe you can get a view and then explain sort of your process, like how you built the wall and the texture, because I know we're all interested in how does one make that. And I saw a couple of these modular pieces, so it looks like you probably built it modularly.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah, this is me thinking in terms of what are all the aspects that I need to break it up, so that if I wanted to, this corridor could go on forever. You know what I mean? Like, so you have already built everything you needed to be able to do that, to achieve that. So in wireframe, you can kind of see what those modular parts are. So you end up, I've brought in like a kit for starters. So I have, this is like, let me just change to like a solid shading mode and then turn off, trying to render the textures
Looks like we got a question here. Do you use Cycles renderer?
Yes, that's what we were using, for the PBR stuff. That's what that is. The Cycles is the physically based rendering in Blender, which has been in for ages. Actually, it's just people don't really not use it that much for game textures, but you can. It's people have. I mean, the amazing thing is that you've got all the painting ability in Blender and stuff like that. I mean, there isn't a lot of stuff out there for people using Blender to its maximum potential, really, for game artists. So that's an area I want to try and fill, really, with, as we said. I mean, I keep going on about this site that I'm talking about, where this stuff so far has been covered. There's me and a couple of other guys out there that are sort of doing some showing the what Blender kind of can help with in your gaming, your gaming workflow, basically. So yeah, back to that scene, because of the modularity. Let's see. Yeah, the modularity on this. This is the various different pieces that I've got for the pipes and so on going down the sides. Is this? Oh, okay. Yeah, so you can now see maybe on here somewhere. Yeah, you can see I've started to add that in. Can you see these sort of things that snake along the walls of the objects now?
Yeah, yeah.
With buildings, that's basically that's a modular set. So you want like T pieces, bends 45 degrees, maybe 60 degrees. For more, like I said, for more information on that, you might want to check out that modularity thing to do with angles on the CG Masters site. And this is an example of going around corners, having a pillar piece. And then some parts at the top there, which is for silhouettes. So these are the various different parts at the top, and then that will just be populated and repeated, and maybe there'll be another kit which will just have aerials and stuff on it, and I'll just sort of pull that together.
If you can go back to the opening in the valley, or in the alley rather, and that corner when you said the pillar piece, I just want to show people how the modular pieces are built and how you would put it together. So, like with floating geometry, if you could explain just this section of the wall, because I think it's.
So yeah, this is a section, one section of the wall, which is if I just grab its parent sort of handle here that I've got, and then sort of move that around, you can see that this is like that's essentially one modular piece. So, but I've broken it into two. So I have some upper floors and some lower floors. And then there's various pieces which can be borrowed between various different building facades. So like the pipe kit, like the doors, like the windows, could just be hovering geometry. So let's see if I've got something like on here. And then you can see how that's broken down. I've actually started to cut into the... so it's not just sort of hovering in front of the building, like not glued in. It's actually extruded back, and then you've got extra pieces that can reflect light and stuff from the main lights in the game. So it just sort of creates a bit more of an interest. Or I might have to pull that out because I'll be like, I can't fit that on the game and have it run smoothly once everything's in. But you can take that decision as you make it. But then I have this piece, which is slightly different because it needs to still be able to allow to stick everything to the grid. So if I can try and find okay, let me just try and find a piece here from the top. So if we just go from the top view for a minute, you can see. This is what I mean by sticking to the grid. If we take that piece there, the handle, that is sort of bang on this grid here. If I zoom right out, maybe you can see it a bit easier. There's a kind of a section where you can sort of see that this is definitely on the right grid line. And then if we got snapping and we turn that on, you can see it's, in fact, let's just...
And I don't want to hijack.
You can see how that's... Sorry, you can see how that snaps kind of like, and now I can start placing that, and I don't have to worry about being delicate with that, basically.
So you're saying that using the grid when building modularly, it keeps yeah, it keeps you from having to place it. Is that something that you
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
always do? Is it something that I know? Is there like a bad way to build modularly?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, modularity comes in just degrees.
Hmm.
So you could have just use a few modular parts on the facade, but on another way of looking at that, you could have the whole thing is just totally modular. So as much as possible is just crazy modular. You've got things on the grid like I'm doing at the moment. So you have this. You can see these demo block out pieces which I had, and you can see how they just
With
fit
the
on this
angles.
grid
Hmm.
line. Yeah, and that allows us to take this piece and then maybe grab that piece, duplicate that, put that there, then grab that piece, and none of these pieces will take us off this main grid
Right.
of 4 by 4. And that's kind of the key, really. So you design your buildings shapes. I actually design them from above, but you can obviously you're going to want to check how they actually look from ground level. One of the cool things in Blender, by the way, is you can grab like a plane and just drop it in. Let's just see. Let's drop that in. Still set to snapping, and then yeah, let's scale that right up. Actually, let's see. Let's drop that below everything else. Press G, move that over. And then if I get on top, and then I think if I can just press Shift F, you can start to
Oh, that's
walk
awesome.
around. Yeah, and then believe it or not, you can actually just press Tab, and then you can actually everything gets given gravity and collision.
Oh, wow.
As you're modeling, you can literally just treat it as an FPS.
And that saves you time because I know when I'm
Yeah,
building 3ds Max, I'm constantly importing new assets, and I'll hit play
yeah,
on Unreal, and
yeah.
I'll run around and look at stuff. So
Yeah.
that's
So that's really
brilliant.
easy in Blender. Yeah, you can just jump straight in on that, or you could use its internal game engine, and instead of just using that thing that we just used, then you could actually just maybe you've got an FPS script in there, and you actually got your basic game environment sort of logic. You get your basic game logic because Blender's game logic works a little bit like blueprints.
Oh,
So
okay.
so, which is how it's always been. It's for years it's been had all these sorts of abilities. And I mean one of the reasons I use Blender is because it does so many things. So it's good for texturing. I like it for modeling. It's good for these various different modes here. There's a sculpt mode. There's you can vertex paint in here. There's a couple of limitations, like for example, there's no vertex alpha. But what you do is you set up an extra vertex color channel and you paint that black to white, and then you have that set up in another material. It's just a little bit more setup, basically.
Right. So it looks like we got a couple of questions in the chat. Nim Thora. This is always a challenge trying to say their usernames.
Mhm.
um, oh, where'd it go? I see you have all the pieces modeled separately. Do you use linked duplicates to combine the loose assets to make the scene so that when you change one piece, it changes them all? So are you like if you have a modular wall and then you duplicate that, and are you linking them so if you make one change to that wall, it transport it does it for all the walls like that in the scene, or are you doing
Yeah,
it by
yeah. That's yeah. I mean, this is you basically another way of saying that is like having it as instances. So many of them are instances of one another. That would be how I will set up the entire thing. So at the moment, this is kind of like a test. Like if I have this facade, that facade, and now let's just try and do various variations. So each one of these ones coming down. So let's just get in here a little bit more. So yeah, so I've got a version of it here. I've got a version where I basically went in and cut that up, and you can see this. I've not exactly cleaned it up, but I've just because it's I just cut round the texture,
Mhm.
just using the cut tool, and then then swap that out for a different texture just to break that up. So in fact, I think we could probably see that by using this method of just texturing that solid briefly. In fact, I'll put that on. It's not going to look very attractive, but you're going to be able to see textures at least, and without it lagging probably either. Yeah. So
Oh,
you can
okay.
see Yeah, you can see how I've cut around the brick and then put some cement there. And these black areas are vertex paint colors. So what I would need to do is just click them off, and you can see that there's various different textures that are being highlighted and shown right now. But this is basically like a solid shading view. It's not a text. This isn't a textured view. This is just a kind of like a in-between view, which gives you this all-round lighting. So it's basically just set on normals and stuff. But anyway, you can see I'm trying to do variations on, okay, here's another building. This is based on the mood board of how I want these kinds of industrial-like buildings that are around in Manchester, just kind of, these kinds of window frames, that kind of railing. And then, okay, so I'm breaking it up again. I've got another trim here, another couple of trims down there. In fact, I might have a section where there's actually just trims. Yeah, here. So you can just see there's a few basic trims there. And these are all different areas that I can basically put together and help break up a facade.
All right, looks like we got another question. When modeling an asset, how should you go about backface culling? Should you model cloth-like stuff with only one plane if you want it to be seen from both sides, or should you give it a box-like structure and give it two faces to avoid backface culling problems?
Well, for cloth, I would guess that each application might handle that sort of stuff differently, but the experience I've had is in the cloth settings you can just enable self collision and it seems to be all right. The stuff I've used it for anyway, it tends to be okay. The cool thing about Max and Blender is you have modifiers, so you could come over to the modifiers and add in some kind of solidify modifier to something which was just a single plane, and that will give you some temporary thickness. So you could then run the cloth simulation on that, and that should work, I would have thought, if you get any weird errors. Yeah, but visually, by the way, this may not be necessarily what the question is about, but I do tend to have backface culling on because I very easily, quickly forget which side is up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Disorientation. Let's see. Triad Gaming says, how easy would it be for someone like me who has basic knowledge of 3ds Max to transition to Blender? Would I pick it up easily, or should I concentrate on getting better at 3ds Max? I think we actually touched that earlier, and if I may, I'm going to jump on that question.
Please do.
All right. We saw Aidy and I talked earlier. I think with any kind of discipline you have, especially since we're talking about 3D, if you get the basics, silhouette, form, edge flow, when you're learning a new software, it just comes down to learning the interface of that software, because if you have those basic skills, it'll translate to anything. It's like driving a car. If you know how to drive a Ford Focus, you'll know how to drive any other car. And more reference the game, if you know how to play a first-person shooter, you can pick up any first-person shooter and play it. So don't think you have to jump ship to Blender, quote unquote. Just practice the basics. No matter what 3D software you have access to, it'll translate over.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I eventually shifted was, personally anyway, it was just because I do these sorts of things at home. So, what I wanted to do was, oh, right, I've got a scene here that the lights aren't on. Anyway, the reason I did that was just because I wanted to do a lot of stuff. I knew I was going to start doing stuff from home. I'm already familiar with Max. I'm already familiar with Maya. So I thought, well, let's check out Blender, see how that goes. And it did everything I needed it to do. So, then the more I got into it, the more I realized it did actually some more than Maya certainly did at that time. So I would start to export things into Blender and then export them back into Maya after I'd done it. For example, Maya doesn't have a solidify by default, or I think there is an add-on you can get somewhere, but I just found it very hard to find. I just couldn't track that down. And in fact, it's not as good as having a solidify modifier like that, because there's some cases where it's just not going to be suitable. Like there's some changes that you might want to do to a mesh. Like sometimes things that aren't necessarily covered are, you not only are making the render mesh, you are making the collision mesh. Not only are you making the collision mesh, you might be making light blocking volumes, which are also basically mesh objects, which are designed to rectify any weird lighting issues, or just is the way the engine works. You need to have a folder at export time called light blocking, and everything in there is going to cast a shadow, or it's going to stop the rendering. You know, you might have occlusion volumes which are modeled again, and some of that stuff, it might be cause weird issues. So for example, you might have a light mesh, something which is blocking light from coming in. You picture a tunnel. You're going through that tunnel, and there's a sun lamp in the world of the game engine. Now, because the tunnel, the faces inside of it are facing downwards into you. So you're, from your player perspective, you're looking up at the faces, but those are single faces. You know, they don't have a normal facing the other way to block the sunlight. So you might be inside a tunnel, and yet the light is passing through the back face of that mesh and then hitting the ground and making like the interior of the tunnel look like it's bright sunshine, which is obviously a problem. So what you might need is a mesh which is designed, basically the same mesh as the render, but flipped. And not only that, but probably slightly less resolution, because stuff which is casting dynamic shadows and stuff is probably render heavy. But anyway, the intensive on the CPU and stuff.
So would you say? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was going to say, am I confusing anyone, or is that, have I gone off on a tangent now? Or
a bit of a tangent. We'll reel you back in. But I think 404 Volt was the one that asked that question. He was asking, should he depend on the engine to do a two-sided face? And I think you actually answered this. Or should he do it like before? Perfect example, what you said, if you have a tunnel. Should we model that first as a box, or however you want to accomplish that? Should you do that in engine, or have the engine itself, or not, excuse me, not in an engine, in your 3D modeling program? Or should you have the engine try to accomplish that for you?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, what we did in TT Fusion, that was pretty much, I guess you could say, that was the engine was doing that, or at least some meshes that you were creating was then being interpreted by the engine to sort that problem out for you. But the reason I mentioned the solidify modifier was because sometimes if you have faces that are in exactly the same position, you might get that weird moiring effect, which is a weird kind of it sort of looks like a very mathematical pattern of bended kind of curves intertwining, like almost like a checker. It's a very unusual sort of thing that you get, and it's basically when it's a little bit like Z fighting, if anyone's familiar with that. It's basically like it doesn't quite know what to render, and you can get this, sometimes you can get this weird moiring effect. And if you've got that, that means you need to essentially expand everything on its normal. So take every individual face and then move it slightly along its normal, so that it's no longer sat in the same place, but is not actually being shifted, because this tunnel might be snaking all over the place.
Right.
So just scaling the mesh ain't gonna cut it. So a solidify modifier is the perfect solution there, which is a reason why in that case I do remember taking something into Blender to do that really easily and very quickly, just to check something and then bring it back and go, aha, right, okay, because that was in the bug fixing stage, and you've got a load of bugs and you want to get through them, so you just want to get it done. Yeah.
All right, a question from Mr. Sea Dolphins as opposed to land dolphins. Do you do any concept art, Photoshop or painting, landscape designs, or do you just do 3D art?
Yeah, I just do 3D art really. It's like my own, but for the stuff I do for myself, like personally my own sort of things that I enjoy, yeah, I do tend to do the concept work for it as well. But I might get like a friend to do it as well, though, come to think of it. But yeah, I mean, concept art I don't feel is necessarily my forte, certainly, but I'm okay. I could get something done. But yeah, I don't necessarily feel like a concept artist.
Get your point across, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that my method would be, I tend to do. There's the FZD school of the concept art. That guy, the guy who does all like the that tends to do Star Wars film stuff and a load of the big games. His school is amazing for concept artists, and he does a load of free stuff. He releases a lot of free content on that. I think it's FZD Design School. That stuff, I watched through a ton of that, and I kind of employ a few of those sorts of methods, if that makes any sense.
Right. Well, I think that we've covered pretty much everything. I just want to make sure nobody has some lasting questions. We're gonna wrap it up as we've been running for 2 hours now, just chatting back and forth.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate your time, and it's been wonderful getting sort of
it's been fun. I appreciate being on.
Getting the other side of the fence, because like we were talking before, we always hear about, what to expect in the studio, and I think the fear is like, how much should I know going in there, or how much should I have? Like, I don't want to go in there unprepared, but what should I know? What's the best thing I could do? Like, for example, me, I'm in Minnesota. There's no gaming studio, so like we were saying, there's not like a coffee shop I can go to and somebody's on their laptop 3D modeling and I can just pick their brain. So it's been wonderful that you've demystified that whole, like, what to expect, and I think that the viewers will appreciate that as well as me.
Cool. That's awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna end up going through retrospectively through some of these comments, and maybe I don't know, can I answer some of this later?
Yeah.
If there's anything we've missed. I don't know whether.
Yeah, we can do it. We'll do it. We have a Facebook page for 3D Artist Studio that we just started, and you're more than welcome to follow us if you haven't followed us.
I have, yeah. I'm already on there. Yeah. I've got you. Got my eye on you.
Right, you can post on there, and then if you guys want to ask any questions, I guess that would be a great hub, or even on CG Masters. And if you guys think of anything, and hopefully we can build this nice relationship with CG Masters and have Aidy back on a bit.
Totally, yeah. Totally, yeah. Because some of those other guys, I mean, you've got Chris, who is, he's from he did the Open Game Project, and I'm sure he's got a few crazy things to talk about on that, like trying to create a open game project and all the weird politics that comes with that sort of stuff. And then you've got Lee, who does the anime. He's an amazing animator. Stunning stuff. I mean, check out on the site just what some of these guys do. This is I just sort of show on the about page of like what some of these guys are contributing. So I mean, there are paid stuff on this site, but you don't have to drop a dime if you don't want to. There should be plenty of free stuff on just to get a feel of it, and that's what I'm all about right now. I'm trying to do as much of this free stuff as possible now. Just trying to share as much as possible, grow the audience and that kind of stuff as well. So
right on.
Yeah, you can. Lee is an amazing character animator and modeler as well, for that matter. And so check out his stuff and Chris's stuff. And you've got Greg here as well. He's like a lighting and texturing artist. So there's a few interesting things on there. So hopefully you'll find some worth on that, and we can hook up together. If there's anybody that wants to ask any other further questions, this is where you'll find me. And
I think we've covered everything, and we're gonna wrap it up here. And Mr. Aidy, if you could stay on after we stop the stream, we can converse some more. I'd like to thank all 40 people that jumped in, and then the following people that will look at the video. It's been great. You guys asked some amazing questions, and I think we really demystified what to expect and got those first day jitters out of the way. Again, I would like to thank Mr. Aidy, and I would like to thank CG Masters for allowing us to do this too. And if you guys haven't followed him, he has his page up right there. You can find him at CG Masters on Facebook. Hit the follow link. It's a great site for learning and poly counts and all those other things, but CG Masters is one of the top, I think. At that, unless you want to say something else, Mr. Aidy, I believe that our first successful interview, 3D Artist Studio.
Beautiful.
You've broken the ribbon, and the champagne's been burst.
Sweet. Great. No, that's awesome. Thank you very much for allowing me to do that.
All right, we're going to stop the stream, and if you could stay on afterwards.
Cool, man.
All right, well, you guys have a good one. I'll be streaming after this interview, more 3D modeling, but that's pretty much it for this one. So you guys have a good night, and thank you.